Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're talking about a really profound shift in therapy. It's all about moving away from this idea of the therapist as some distant, objective observer and towards something way more powerful, a therapist who actually becomes a partner, who steps into the relationship to help create real, lasting change. So let's just dive right in with a question that really gets to the heart of all this. What do you think is a therapist's most powerful tool? I mean, really, is it some fancy technique? A perfect diagnosis? That one killer question? Well, the source we're digging into today says nope, it's something way more immediate, something alive. Okay, so to really get this, you got to see it as a tale of two therapists, two completely different approaches. You've got the classic observer, right? Kind of distant, very technical, always following the script. But then you have the partner. This therapist is present, they're relational, and they're brave enough to step right into the messiness of the patient's story while it's actually happening. All right, first up, the old way. For a long, long time, the thinking went something like this. A therapist's power comes from keeping a safe distance. Objectivity was everything. The fear was that if you got too involved, too emotional, you just cloud your judgment and be useless. Let's make this super concrete. Picture a patient who comes in and their whole vibe is just apologetic. They're constantly seeking permission, avoiding saying what they really want. They're basically acting out this lifelong script of people-pleasing, and they're doing it right there in the room with a therapist. See, they're not just telling you about the pattern, they're actively showing it to you. So the observer therapist, the one sticking to the playbook, asks the totally logical, standard question, what do you want for yourself? And look, on the surface, that makes perfect sense, right? It's supposed to spark some big insight. But what happens next is not at all what you'd expect. Boom, the patient's anxiety just shoots through the roof. But why? Well, think about it. By staying distant and asking that question, the therapist has, completely by accident, become the very thing the patient expected, another authority figure they have to get permission from. So the pattern isn't just ignored, it's actually made stronger in that moment. And this is where the big revelation comes in. It turns out the most important story isn't the one the patient is telling you about what happened way back when. No, it's the story they are living out right now, in the room, in the relationship with the therapist. All the power, all the potential for healing, it's right there in the present moment. There's a term for this, and it's called a relational enactment. And honestly, it's a beautiful idea. It means that patients are always, constantly, showing us their deepest patterns, how they love, how they connect, how they protect themselves, through the actual real-time relationship they're building with their therapist. So, what does the partner therapist do? Something totally different. Instead of asking, what do you want? They name what's happening between them right then and there. They might say something like, hey, is this a pattern for you that when you want something, you kind of wait to see if it's okay with the other person first? And just like that, everything changes. The focus isn't on a problem inside the patient anymore, it's on a pattern happening between two people. And this is the new way. It's all about naming that invisible dance that's happening in the room. You make it visible so that now you can both look at it together as a team. Okay, so when the therapist does this, it has this incredible four-step chain reaction. First, you name the pattern, right? You make it visible. Instantly, that creates an alliance. It's not me, the therapist, and you, the patient anymore. It's us versus this pattern. See how that separates the person from the problem? And just as important, it yanks the therapist right out of that old, tired role the patient story tried to put them in. And this is absolutely the key to avoiding the biggest trap of all. Because if a therapist forgets they're in the relationship, they just end up becoming the next person the patient has to ask for permission, the next authority figure. They get totally stuck in the patient's old script. But by naming that dance, they break the spell. Now, this whole approach, it's so much more than just a clever technique. It's a really deep, profound invitation for the patient to experience something completely new. Think about the message this sends. When a therapist works inside the relationship like this, they're essentially saying, hey, I'm with you now. We're going to fight this thing that you couldn't fight on your own. I'm reaching out my hand, and we're going to work together against this old, painful way of relating. It's a complete shift from just analyzing a problem to forming an alliance against it. And what is that really? It's an invitation to a new way of love, a totally new relational experience. Therapy becomes this space where you can finally feel what it's like to have someone stand beside you, not across from you. someone to help you carry a burden that you thought you had to carry all by yourself forever. So, this is where the real magic, the real transformation happens. Because, let's be honest, real healing doesn't just come from understanding something in your head. It comes from having a new, lived experience with another person. An experience that can actually rewire those old, painful patterns at the deepest emotional level. The therapy room literally becomes a safe place to practice a new way of being. It's like a lab for connection. You know that healing is happening right there, in the realness of that relationship. And for the first time, maybe ever, someone is standing beside you in the fight, not just watching from the sidelines. It's about building a whole new model for relationships in your heart and in your mind. So yeah, this way of working asks a lot of therapists. You have to be more present, maybe even more vulnerable. But the beautiful thing, as our source points out, is that the patients are already doing it. They're already showing us the way, bringing their entire world of relationships right into that room. So the real question is, are we ready to step in and meet them there, to create a new story together?